All right, guys, welcome to the Ravit Show. We have a very special guest today. It's none other than Bruno Aziza, a well-known leader in the data analytics space. A little about Bruno is the head of data and analytics at Google Cloud. Bruno is a technology entrepreneur. He has focused on scaling business and turning them into global leaders. Bruno has led startups, medium and large size organization in the US, France, the UK, and Germany. Some of them include Microsoft, Business Objects, and Oracle. Bruno currently works at Google Cloud. Today, we will be discussing about data mesh, data observability, and data literacy. A lot to do in 30 minutes. I know Bruno has like good 30 minutes with us today. So feel free to ask as many questions as you can. And this should be super fun session. Also, what we are doing today is giving away one annual subscription of 365 data science. So what you guys can do is quickly type in hashtag 365 data science, and towards end of the show we will be doing a raffle and announcing our winners. Since we are short on time, let's not make Bruno wait backstage and let's get him up here. Hey Bruno, welcome to the Ravit
Hey,
Show.
how are you? Thanks for having me.
It's such a pleasure. We are always been hearing so much from you in terms of in the data space, now data mesh. I've recently read your article too. Oh, I loved it. And today, obviously, I get a chance to ask you more around data mesh, data literacy, and what's happening in the data and analytics space. But for our audience, why not start with your introduction, Bruno?
For sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me here. If you hear a little bit of an accent, it's because I'm French. I moved to the US about 20 years or so. I've been in the data space my entire life. And so I've had the opportunity to work with great companies, small, medium, and large. I think you named some of them here. Alpine Data Labs was a small one that we sold to TIPCO. Medium was Business Objects. If you remember Business Objects at the very beginning, before Crystal Reports and ACTA. So I was there during those days. And then, of course, large organizations like Microsoft, Oracle, and now Google. I focus really my work on working with customers. And so that's why I'm excited to be with you here today, is because we'll talk a lot about what customers are seeing, how they're innovating, and so forth. There's a few ways that you can connect with me online. The most obvious one is LinkedIn. That's where I spend a lot of my networking time on LinkedIn. It's a platform that's great for scaling and really connecting truly with people. I update every Sunday night. I try to give an update of the top 5 data AI and analytics posts of the week. So I try to stay engaged with the audience and try to kind of serve them with what it is that I learned by talking to customers all week long.
Fantastic, Bruno. And I know for a fact where I've been following you since forever now, and not only from your car sessions. Obviously we'll be touching base on that as well. I have a very interesting question for you, but since obviously you've been in this space like for years now, how do you see in the last 5 years that data has evolved, or maybe this space as a whole has evolved in the last 5 years?
Yeah. So first of all, it's exciting to be in data now in 2022 because, being in data 20 years ago could have been pretty depressing if you were there back then, because back then, not many people cared about databases and, artificial intelligence. Over the last 20 years, we've seen tremendous evolution. I think the first one is, of course, cloud technology, right? I think it was just last year that Gartner predicted that 75% of databases would be in the cloud. And so clearly people are moving to the cloud at an incredible clip. And so that's exciting because, when you have so many resources available to you, pace to innovation is accelerated. The
Right.
second thing is artificial intelligence. Over the last 10 years, I was just listening to a talk by Jeff Dean about how to use the machine learning for making machines a lot more effective. And this
True.
idea that we have access to incredibly powerful computational services now means that machines are going to get better than humans
Exactly.
at detecting speech or images and so forth. So, over the last 20 years, we went from just talking to reporting and analytics to now really kind of accelerating our pace to innovation by machine learning, cloud technology, and of course, organization uh, changes. The CDOs are now becoming predominant in the organization. I think 10 years ago, 12% of organizations had CDOs, and now it's 75, 74% of organizations have chief data officers. So we're getting organized
Exactly.
in a way that's really quite impressive. And so it's exciting to be in this field now.
Okay, this is fantastic and great insights, Bruno. Obviously, since I was talking about your recent article about data mesh, which was like phenomenal, and can you also tell us more about your thoughts about how data mesh is, has just got the spark, and
Yeah.
now everyone's talking about it. Where do you see it after 2 3 years? Would love to know your thoughts, and also just for the audience, feel free to ask questions so we can take a few questions. We're limited on time, but we'll do as much as we can.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I'm looking at the questions here, so I'll try to
Yep.
see a lot of people that I recognize, folks that have been connecting online for the last 2 years, that actually I've never met in person, like Mike and Joe and so forth. So it's great to see them here.
Exactly.
So to your question on the data mesh, so yes, the data mesh has been a predominant topic for organizations, is because it really relates to this issue of centralized and decentralized access of data and also innovation. In the piece that you're referring to, the article I wrote a couple of weeks ago on
Right.
VentureBeat, I think it's called "The What is the Data Mesh and Why You Should Care." I essentially talk about three things.
Hmm.
The first thing is, what should you be worried about with the data mesh? And interestingly enough, it's not the term that you should be worried about, is how people are going to kind of advance this concept. And I talk about this concept of the 3 Ds of the data mesh: the disciples, the distractors, and the disruptors. So I'll take you through that, and maybe
Exactly.
we can talk about the rest of the article. But the first one is, the disciples are going to be the folks that have read Jamak's paper and really trying to stay true to it. And that's who I would go to, right? So I would go to those folks that have really read the papers, like the chief data officer of L'Oreal, for instance, that has written blogs about how they've now taken this concept and deployed it at the organization. So we could really learn how to be successful with the data mesh. That's really the audience I would try to spend as much time as I can with, if you're trying to
Right.
learn about it. The second D of the data mesh is the, the distractors, or the folks that will tell you, there's nothing new here. And like we
Hmm.
just talked about in the first question, it's really difficult to believe that there would be nothing new when the conditions have changed tremendously, right? We have
Right.
cloud, we have unlimited computational power, we have now people organizing themselves to take advantage of the data opportunity. So things have changed. So it is normal to see new concepts, and maybe they're an evolution of something we knew. But to say that there's nothing new, I think, is really problematic. And then the third one is the ones I would watch out for are the distorters, the people I'll tell you, hey, you know what, you like the data mesh, buy my product, buy my services, because with just a click of the button, you're going to get a data mesh. And I think that's kind of missing the point of what the data mesh is, which is not a technology concept only, it's an organizational concept. And so that's kind of, when you read the article, I made that kind of the first section, explaining what the data mesh is and being careful about where you get information about it, because it could be tremendously helpful or it could completely distract you as you're trying to be successful with this new concept.
Right. And I think that definitely does make a lot of sense. Also, we have a interesting comment from Petri here. And he also mentions
Yeah,
your friend Bernard Mars. So,
Bernard, yeah.
yeah, he's like, I got difficult to explain business. Read this page, morning business, Bernard Mars, data strategy, and mesh comes somewhere at the page 200, how to tell to business. So it's
Yeah.
more on the lines where, he's kind of pointing out that how difficult it is
Yeah.
to point out to business what data mesh is today.
So let me maybe try and
Yeah.
help you, Petri, because you're right that this is a concept that uh, is very buzzy right now, and it has the risk of just becoming one of those trends that we actually don't do much with. And so what we have seen organizations succeed with is kind of this evolution through the data mesh concept. The first one, I think, and you'll see in the article, is the data mesh is not the end of your journey and it's not the beginning of your journey. If you step back from a business standpoint, what are you trying to do? You're trying to drive innovation by making data products become a production thing your organization is able to do. Think about anomaly detection, and think about fraud analytics, and recommendation engines are a great example. Those are data products. If you read the paper of the data mesh, the end goal is enabling your organization to take advantage of data so you can create data products. What we see organizations go through is a 3-stage model, if you will, of maturity, where the data mesh is actually right in the middle. So the first one is about creating your technical environment so you can see all the data, right? Some organizations like Vodafone, for instance, called the data ocean. This idea that a data lake
Right.
is landlocked and it's comfortable, but unfortunately it fails to engage people. The data ocean is try to be as complete as you can to catalog and understand where your data is across cloud, on premise, and in the cloud. The second stage of the data mesh really is about organizational efficiency around innovating at the edge while having compliance and data governance centrally, right? So having policy centrally that can be deployed to data wherever it is. And then finally, this third phase of building data products is where artificial intelligence comes in. Data intensive applications can be built. So semantic layers, for instance, could be really important there. So that's kind of how I would look at it. I would look at, okay, my first phase is around multi-cloud data warehousing, transactional analytical workloads coming together. My second phase is about governance. So this is where data fabrics come together. And my
Right.
third phase is where artificial intelligence semantic layers come together, where now I'm building data products. To the extent to which, Petre, you can break this down for the business community, it will be most helpful, particularly when you think about starting with the end in mind. And the end in mind is, if you're in the business, if you're in marketing, you're trying to build real-time recommendation models. If you're in finance or in
Right.
fraud, you're trying to detect fraud before it happens. So start talking to them about that, and then explain to them the maturity of getting through the data mesh that way. Hopefully, that's important. I see that Petri and Christina are talking through it. So great to see
Yeah.
Christina as well. But hopefully, yeah. So hopefully he's saying it's helping him. So that's
Yeah.
good. But feel free to engage with us online as well, even after this, and hopefully we can help you out. I can
Yeah,
point you to
definitely.
examples as well of organizations that have done this well.
Okay, let's take this one, something around what your domain is, from Aditi. What, according to you, are the major challenges in data and analytics?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I don't know how much time we have today,
Yeah.
but there are quite a few challenges. I think the first challenge is there is where organizations want to go, and there is where they're starting from, right? And so this idea of you know um, wanting to innovate but not having the tools and the organizational footprint for it is really a challenge for organizations. I'll give you an example. Do you have enough data people as in your organization? There's a difference between a company that, like Wayfair, for instance, 3,000 data people and data engineers, as they have 18,000 people. So they have about 20% of their employee base is focused on the data opportunity. DBSA, I think, is a bank in Asia. Same thing. They have more people working on data than they might have people working on finance. So being able to have the
True.
right mix of employee and the right level of focus is probably the number one barrier you're going to have, because you can have aspirations and so forth, but if you don't have the workforce and the engineering talent, you're going to have issues getting there. The second thing, that's probably the biggest thing, if you look at Randy Bean's survey on the issues, to get us there, is culture, right? So having a top-down culture that just says, "Hey, we will become a data-driven company," and so forth. It's one thing to be bottom up, and certainly you have a lot of success getting there by having a lot of heroes across the organization, but you also need more than just buy-in from your CEO. You need really executives that believe in the data opportunity, and so that gets in the way, right? So inability to have the organizational structure, inability to have the management that believes in it, really gets in the way of taking full advantage of the data analytics opportunity. Now it's interesting because I work at a vendor, so you probably expect me to talk to you about, hey, you need to have software and so forth. And that's true, right? So partnering with the right vendor is extremely important. But what I would say is probably the human stuff, the people stuff, if you will, is probably harder to go out and solve. We joke often, we say it's the soft stuff that's the hard stuff. And so I think, to that question, what is the most complicated thing, is probably that dimension first.
Yeah, definitely. And that definitely answers for Aditi. Nice one there. We have a few comments coming in. I see Andy Petrella here.
Yeah.
So he says, bonjour. Also, a quick question here from Sakab. Since you were focusing on data analysis stuff, is the data mesh more of computer specialized or data analysis and management in general? What do you think?
So I'm not sure that it is about a specialty. I'm trying to kind of understand the background on the question. Sakai, if you could tell me more about what's behind your question, it would be helpful. Certainly,
Yeah.
what I would say is that it's not about technology, right? This certainly technology is important here in how it enables you to get there, but it's less about how many computers you have or the type of technology that you're using. I mean, certainly there's been a lot of debates around the difference between the data fabric and the data mesh. Certainly got a lot of people excited over the last few months. And what I would say about that is, try to not get lost in those articles and in those debates, because it's not
Yeah.
really helpful when we argue the semantics all day long and we
Mhm.
don't focus on what are the techniques to actually help you innovate. It reminds me of 10 years ago, the industry was arguing about what is the difference between a dashboard and a scorecard. And,
Hmm.
sure, having clarity on what it is that you're building is important, but then you need to move on and actually implement those things. And so I would try
Exactly.
and look for those. Sakai is look for examples of organizations that have succeeded. Look for people that have actually made it a reality before, try to get into the arguments of who gets the credit for what invention and
Exactly.
the arguments around semantics. Those are not super helpful.
I think it's more about the execution that you're talking here. That okay, we are kind of obviously discussing, but execution kind of matters the most. Also, we had like a good question from Mike Nash when we were promoting. So I'll take the question here. Uh, Mike says, given the complexity of today's data landscape with so many options, methods, tools, and approaches, which is the best strategy to modernize a company's data architecture? Very interesting question.
That's a great question. Yeah, and Mike is very active. I read a lot of what he posts online. Always is great at
Yeah,
finding insightful
great stuff.
information. So
Yeah.
so you're right. It's really complex, and there is temptation to just try and do everything at the same time. Um, I think the first one is modernizing your data platform is probably the first step, right? If you break it up across what are the key components of your modern data stack, the first one is the technical and data foundation that is really tremendously important. The second block, and that is not a small task, right?
Hmm.
Because today you can just try and lift and shift what you have, right? So many organizations start with on-premise systems and they just look at, okay, how do I get that in the cloud? And while that's a good step, you're missing the opportunity to improve your processes. So I would say in the process of building a data platform in the cloud, really take a look at, how can you be better than what you had uh, on premise, not just from a cost standpoint, but from a value standpoint. So a great example of a use case, for instance, here would be data sharing, right? So you have a great on-premise platform that scales, but doesn't accomplish the goals that you want technically, humanly,
Right.
and is expensive, and you move to the cloud. Don't just be driven by saying that you're going to save money here. You want to look at use cases where sharing data at scale is more secure and it's easier for you to do. So that's step one. Step two, I would say, look at the way you're building applications, and the landscape is changing, particularly if you look at business intelligence, right? We used to build business intelligence solutions for ourselves as business analysts, or we used to build it for 10 or 100 people. What we've seen over
Right.
the last 5 years is that people now are relying on semantic layers in applications that are built for millions of people. So looking at frameworks that enable you to do that is extremely important. So that's second step. And then the third step is now looking at machine learning and AI as a component to enable your path to innovation. And so here, not many companies have been able to take full advantage of it, because typically these components of data warehousing, business intelligence, and machine learning are very separate. You're going to buy this from multiple vendors, and there's a lot of integration work. And so to the extent to which you can kind of lean in on a platform that enables you to do all three in the same place, really important. So I would kind of break up those things in three things: data platform, semantics, and management of that, and then the ability to operationalize artificial intelligence faster. And the companies that do this, by the way, there's research. companies that do this methodically and in the sequence can out innovate their peers by a factor of 2 to 4 times. And so, to Mike's point, it really is worth it when you break up the problem in small chunks like that.
Wow, the you've just put it in the right way, 3 phases, and you've actually explained the data architecture for companies very well. Thanks for that, Bruno. Also, a quick one from very interesting question from Ramdas that I wanted to pick, which was how does one get the stakeholder buy-in for building data as a product, which eventually forms an integral part of data
Yeah.
mesh? Very
So
interesting.
I'll tell you, I want to say about 10 years ago, I had the opportunity to write a book about best practices for getting buy-in, right? And
Exactly.
what we have found is it's a book that's called Drive Business Performance, and we interviewed hundreds of organizations, and we tried to build a model for, okay, how do you build this culture of business performance and data innovation? And what we found in this case is buy-in is actually not going to be enough, right? So it's important that you get buy-in from your constituents by tying your outcomes your initiatives to outcomes, meaning
Hmm.
don't go out and spend money on data platforms or business applications without starting with, okay, what is the value? In fact, if you look at some of the research out there, one of the issues that chief data officers have, and the reason for why the average tenure of a chief data officer is less than 1,000 days, is because they're struggling with tying the IT initiative to the business value. So that's best
Right.
practice one. The best practice two, frankly, it comes from more than sponsorship. Your CEO needs to be more than on board. They need to be driving, the initiative. So what I would say is, one, work at a company where you have a CEO and an executive team
Right.
that is all in into that. If they are not all in, figure out a way to create a crisis. And the crisis can happen to you because the organization just hasn't been there, or you can kind of quantify a crisis. I've got a customer who managed to show to their executive team that the cost of a mistake is about $50,000. So when you
Oh
make
my.
the wrong decision, it costs your organization $50,000. Now think about how many bad decisions you're making on a daily basis. And so you can kind of quantify to get people into the mindset that you have the data, you have the people, but you decide to ignore it and you don't have buy-in into it. That's the daily cost, is you're being out innovated, you're making the wrong decisions, and ultimately it has a dollar, cents, euro, yen, British pound cost to your organization. That could be devastating, right? So I think there were stats recently I was reading, the inability of organizations to adopt artificial intelligence, it could destroy 75% of organizations over the next 10 years. And so
Oh,
that's tremendous. I mean, if you look at innovation today, right? If you look at transportation, Uber, right, disrupting the transportation industry. You look at financial services. Some organizations really kind of disrupting by being better online than their traditional competitors, who traditionally have been, only physical locations and branches. So
right.
that's what we're talking about, right? Is that, are you disrupting yourself before the market disrupts you? Because it will, inevitably happen. And so
Yeah.
that's what I would kind of try and paint. Ideally, you work at a company where you don't have to do that selling, but if you don't, paint the picture and the cost of a crisis.
Wow, this is fantastic explanation. I'm sure it helps Ramdas a lot. Okay, since we are talking a lot around data mesh, that also brings me to a very important topic. In it's kind of hot right now, which is more around the side where I've heard a lot around data observability space.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about it, Bruno?
So it kind of connects with everything we just talked about here, right?
Yeah.
So if you data ops, so what is data ops, right? So it's the ability to monitor and detect, prevent, resolve issues across your data pipeline. And so, for any problem, the first step of the ability of solving the problem is to be able to be aware of it, right, and observe it. And so
Yeah.
data observability is really an important capability your organization needs to have if you want to actually be innovating on the data. The next step beyond observability is the operationalization of the actions related to what it is that you're trying to do. And so what we see a lot of organizations, and I joke, I said, a lot of the organizations have data oops and they don't have the data ops, right? And so that's what I think I would take this debate towards is, how can you get to data ops and ML ops as soon as possible? This idea of having the assets and operationalizing that into innovation quickly, being able to come back, redevelop, and reship your data products. That's where data observability and data ops for me play a tremendous role at making all the ideas that we have a reality for constituents. I mean, ultimately, you want to be able to build this factory by which you understand the data you have and
Right.
turn that into products that differentiate your organization. And data observability connected with data ops is the way to get there. There's lots of great organizations there. What's happening now is we have so much data and so few people that can
Mhm.
actually analyze and work on that data, that using
Exactly.
machine learning, you're able to automate a lot of the processes, right? So you're able to truly, get to the end goal that you're trying to achieve, which is build data products.
This is fantastic. Also, that brings me to a very important topic. Obviously, you have summed up well in terms of the data ops and how you've connected well it with the data mesh. But that brings me to a very important and a very literal topic, which is, when we talk about teams and we talk about people, and especially with the data team and organization, I know for a fact data literacy kind of plays a very important
Yeah.
role. And it's obviously one of the things that I have heard most of the top-notch leaders like Ben Jones in the data literacy, saying that it is a must for every organization. But what are your thoughts about it, Bruno?
Yeah, and it's top of mind for lots of data leaders, right? Because you've got to think about the folks that are chief data officers today or head of data at organizations. They've been in this space for a long time, so we tend to forget what it's like to not have data literacy, right? And so it's important that we kind of bring everyone along with us, and that means new data folks starting in the career. It means business people who really maybe didn't study data science or stats as much in school, or maybe they did, but they forgot and so forth. And so what we've seen is that organizations that succeed with their data initiatives, they really take on this idea of one, half of the problem is communication, making sure that I have a code name for my initiative that's memorable so people know, there's an important initiative that allows us to innovate and it's called blah. I'll give you an example. There's an organization I worked with recently, and they found that a lot of the thing about their culture is gambling, right? So
Right.
they named their project dice. I think it's Data Integration Center of Excellence, dice,
Mm.
or so memorable, right? So first part of data literacy is that get people's attention. It's kind of an internal marketing project for you. What is the code name of your initiative? It sounds trivial, but actually is very important to get people's mind connected with what it is that we're trying to do. Because often when people think about data as, okay, this kind of complicated, difficult to achieve, boring type of thing. So make it interesting. And then second, actually standardize your training uh, process, have office hours, have ways that you can bring everyone along, people that either they want to learn and be closer to the initiative today, but maybe they have an aspiration inside your company to become one of those data engineers. And so, I was talking to Dice Mays. Di Mays is the global head of data at WPP. We just did a talk with her and Forrester, and is an amazing talk because she's explaining that she has this plan to upskill 50,000 people inside the organization. 50,000. So the third thing I would say, right? The first thing is make sure that you communicate clearly the name, the goals of your initiative. The second one is make sure you have an infrastructure to train people and bring them along, office hours, training program. The third thing is have bold goals, right? This data problem is not something that just is for a few people inside your organization. I think increasingly organizations are realizing the better you get with data, the better you're going to be at your job in general. And so take on bold goals to train and upskill people to this data opportunity. The secret is not going to come from hiring two data scientists and then bring them from the
Right.
outside. You got to bring along the people that you have in your organization. There's a reason for why they're your employees today. You have brilliant employees. The answers are often coming from within.
Exactly. And this is super insightful. A quick question from Let's take one last question, Bruno. I know you have like a tight timeline here, but this was super interesting from Andy Petrella, who's like the founder of Kenshu,
Yeah.
and he's into the data observability space. So what would be your take on contracts? This is a best practice in IT for years. Would you consider it in missing in data and analytics? Or if so, how would you involve stakeholders or simply consumers?
Yeah. So contracts, there's few ways that I can think about contracts. Either it's a contract across teams inside the organization, or you mean an actual like a Ethereum blockchain contract, a smart contract. So what I will say, I'll just kind of extrapolate from what you're saying on how do I build trust across the organization. Maybe that's the way to
Yeah,
do it. Um, I think it's at the center actually of the data mesh conversation, right? Because what happens when you have these organizations, these domains that are now the owners of the data itself and they are decentralized, right? So there are a few things that I think you have to do. The first thing is you have to have an organization that is ready for that. There's a great blog that you should take a look at called "The 10 Reasons for Why You're Not Ready for the Data Mesh." Uh,
right,
I'll send you the link if you're interested. But this idea of contracts, you got to be careful because if you have a contract, what does that mean? Does that mean that we don't trust each other, right? So is your organization ready to do it? And then there's the very real consequence of deploying a data mesh improperly, where now you don't have financial ops. So, one of the topics that hasn't been talked about enough when the concept of data mesh is, it's great to talk about distributed data and distributed domains that are owners of innovation at the edge. But from an IT standpoint, how do you actually cross charge? So, if marketing now is the user of most computational power and processing and storage and so forth, do they pay more than the salespeople? How do you organize yourself? And so having a platform that enables you to kind of parse through that is an important thing that I would look at. I think it's something today we don't talk a lot about. I think we'll get there because the data mesh, beginning as a concept is now it's getting kind of gravity with people getting organized around it. What we're going to see next is, how do I pay for it? How do I
right.
organize myself around rewarding
True.
people, maybe charging it as a factor of the value that they're driving. That's going to be an important contract, I think, between IT and the CFO and the folks trying to innovate.
Amazing. This is fantastic insights, Bruno. Okay, I'll take a last quick question, which is around all the sessions that you do in the car. So, is it like a
Yeah.
knowledge machine out there? Can you tell us more about it? Why in the car?
So the genesis kind of is this started a couple years ago
Yeah,
when I was talking to the chief data officer and he was telling me, there's so much information in the space. There's so much noise. I don't really know what to follow. I'm just overwhelmed, and I would love it
right.
if I could have someone that could just summarize for me in 5 minutes what happened this week, what matters. And so I
Wow.
was thinking about it on Sunday in my car, and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to put my phone and I'm just going to say what I learned this week. And that's what I did, and it really took off. And so now I think this past week was 126 car casts back to back. So I've never stopped, right? So what happened after that
Exactly.
is the pandemic came in, and so we really didn't travel, and we didn't do, we didn't have ways to connect except for being in a safe, closed space. And so I thought, I don't need a lot of production or anything like that. Just put my phone, press record, and then post it on YouTube. And so that's kind of the idea.
Yeah.
I do it every weekend. I'm
And
noticing a question by Mike here. He's
yeah,
asking me, where do I find more about the data mesh? Are you doing a talk on data mesh? Yeah, so thanks for reminding me, Mike. Next week, the State of Data Mesh 2022 Summit is happening, ThoughtWorks. So if you know the person that wrote the data mesh paper, Zamak,
Zamak.
organized
Yep.
this summit, and I am talking at this summit, and it's next week. I'll put the link as well in the comment there. And my talk is, how do you make the data mesh real? I think that's where we are now, right? We've talked enough about the concept. Let's share examples of organizations that have succeeded. So there, I'll talk about Delivery Hero. I'll talk
Right.
about L'Oreal. I'll talk about a bunch of organizations that have been able to really succeed with it. And that's, I think, what we want to focus on now. Thanks
Okay.
for reminding me, Mike.
Amazing. I've shared the link with the folks, the summit that is happening by ThoughtWorks. So,
Oh,
folks, you
perfect.
can actually go out and register for it. All right. Before we wrap this up, Bruno, let's quickly announce the winners for 365 Data Science. Let's see who the winner is. This is like the cool raffle that we do.
That's pretty
And
cool.
yeah, we get the winner randomly. So let's see who the winner is. It is Maima. Congratulations, Maima. I'll reach out to you with the annual subscription of 365 Data Science, which will help you to upskill in data science. So, which is good. Bruno, one last question before we wrap this up. It was super insightful. I loved all the insights that you've shared. I'm definitely looking for a 2.0 session very soon. But if the audience, obviously I'm sure the audience have a lot of questions, and if they want to follow your work, the articles that you write, which is the best place to reach out to you?
Well, first, thanks again for having me. It's always fun to talk to you. So we can do this
Thank you.
anytime you want. I would say the best way is the platform we're on now is just ping me on LinkedIn, send me an invite, let's connect, and then do what so many of folks that are here today are doing already. If there's something interesting throughout the week, send it to me. Tag me about it because what I do is on Saturday I'll read through all these, and then I'll pick the five that I think are really interesting, and then I'll just record that. So the main thing I will say is this is not a opportunity to market to me or promote your company or
Yeah,
anything like that. You want to do it in the spirit of what's been helpful for the community, and so that's what I would suggest. Let's advance the community together.
awesome, Bruno. I like that, and I support it 100%. That do it for the community and grow together.
Yeah,
So thank you again, Bruno. It was a pleasure having you. I'll see you soon.
thank you.
Thank you, everyone.